Hi, my name is David. I'm in Tainan, and this is Taiwan in English. In today's exciting episode, we will be continuing on with the legend of Sleepy Hollow. In today's episode, we will find out what people thought about teachers and what our friend Ichabod did in his free time. I guess there ain't nothing to it but to do it. Let's get started. The schoolmaster is generally a man of some importance in the female circle of a rural neighborhood. Being considered a kind of idle, gentlemanlike personage of vastly superior taste and accomplishments to the rough country swines, and indeed inferior in learning only to the parson. His appearance, therefore, is apt to occasion some little stir at the tea table of a farmhouse, and the addition of a supernumerary dish of cakes or sweetmeats, or peradventure the parade of a silver teapot. Our man of letters, therefore, was particularly happy in the smiles of all the country damsels. How he would figure among them in the churchyard between services on Sundays, gathering grapes for them in the wild vines that overran the surrounding trees, reciting for their amusement all the epitaphs on the tombstones, or sauntering with a whole bevy of them along the banks of adjacent mill pond, while the more bashful country bumpkins hung sleepishly back, envying his superior elegance and address. For his half-itinerant life, also, he was kind of a traveling gazette, carrying the whole budget of local gossip from house to house, so that his appearance was always greeted with satisfaction. He was, moreover, esteemed by the women as a man of great erudition, for he had read several books quite thoroughly and was a perfect master of Cotton Mather's History of New England Witchcraft, in which, by the way, he most firmly and potently believed. He was, in fact, an odd mixture of small shrewdness and simple credulity. His appetite for the marvelous and his powers of digesting it were equally extraordinary, and both had been increased by his residence in this spellbound region. No tale was too gross or monstrous for his capacious swallow. It was often his delight, after his school was dismissed in the afternoon, to stretch himself out on the rich bed of clover bordering the little brook that whispered by his schoolhouse, and there con over old Mather's direful tales until the gathering dusk of evening made the printed page a mere mist before his eyes. Then, as he wended his way by swamp and stream and awful woodlands to the house where he happened to be quartered, every sound of nature at the witching hour fluttered his excited imagination. The moan of the whippoorwill from the hillside, the boding cry of the tree frog, the harbinger of storm, the dreary hooting of the screech owl, or the sudden rustling in the thicket of birds frightened from their roost. The fireflies, too, which sparkled most vividly in the darkest places, now and then startled him, as one of uncommon brightness would stream across his path, and if by chance a huge blockhead of a beetle came winging his blundering flight against him, the poor varlet would ready to give up the ghost, with the idea that he was struck with a witch's token. His only resource on such occasions, either to drown through or drive away evil spirits, was to sing psalm tunes. And the good people of Sleepy Hollow, as they sat by their doors of an evening, were often filled with awe at hearing the nasal melody, "Inling sweetness long drawn out," floating from the distant hills or along the dusty road. Another of his sources of fearful pleasure was to pass long winter evenings with the old Dutch wives as they sat spinning by the fire, with a row of apples roasting and sputtering along the hearth, and listening to their marvelous tales of ghosts and goblins, and haunted fields, and haunted brooks, and haunted bridges, and haunted houses, and particularly of the Headless Horseman, or Galloping Hessian of the Hollow, as they sometimes called him. He would delight them equally by his anecdotes of witchcraft, and of the direful omens and portentous signs and sounds in the air, which prevailed in the earlier times of Connecticut, and would frighten them woefully with speculations upon comets and shooting stars, and with the alarming fact that the world did absolutely turn around, and that they were half the time topsy-turvy. But if there was a pleasure in all this, while snuggling, cuddling in the chimney corner of a chamber, that was all of a ruddy glow from the crackling wood fire, and where, of course, no specter dared to show its face, it was dearly purchased by the terror of his subsequent walk homeward. While fearful shapes and shadows beset his path amid the dim and ghostly glare of a snowy night, with what wistful look did he eye every trembling ray of light streaming across the waste fields from which distant window. How often was he appalled by some shrub covered with snow, which, like a sheeted spectre, beset his very path. How often did he shriek with curdling awe at the sound of his own steps and the frosty crunch beneath his feet, and dread to look over his shoulder, lest he should behold some uncouth being trampling close behind him. And how often was he thrown into complete dismay by some rushing blast, howling among the trees, in the idea that it was the Galloping Hessian on one of his nightly scourings. All of these, however, were mere terrors of the night, phantoms of the mind that walk in darkness, and though he had seen many specters in his time, and been more than once beset by Satan in diverse shapes, in his lonely perambulations, yet daylight put an end to all these evils, and he would have passed a pleasant life of it, in despite of the devil and all his works, if his path had not been crossed by a being that caused more perplexing to mortal man than ghost, goblins, and the whole race of witches put together. And that was a woman. That was interesting. Today's installment started out talking about how teachers were very well regarded, that people thought of them as wise and cultured, and second only to the local priest in education. It talked about how people looked forward to them visiting and getting to spend time with them. And it was because of this predisposition that Ichabod was able to spend time basically flirting with the local young women. And many of the local men felt like they were foolish compared to him. It also says that he was a traveling gazette. A gazette is a type of newspaper, meaning that he was really something of a gossip. With the way information is shared today, it might be hard to really understand just how isolated people were. I've written and rewritten examples to try and explain it, but I don't think they do it justice. So take my word for it. In the world before social media and what are basically supercomputing mobile communications devices in all of our pockets, talking to someone that you did not see every day was pretty awesome. The story continues and describes places where Ichabod liked to spend his time reading and how he liked to scare himself. The installment ends saying that this is likely how he would have spent the rest of his life if not for a woman. Questions. Number 1. What were some of the things about Ichabod that impressed the locals, and do you think they are impressive? Number 2. What kind of things did Ichabod do that made the local men feel foolish? Number 3. Ichabod liked sharing stories. When the local women would tell him stories about the Headless Horseman, what kind of stories would he tell them? And that's it for the third installment and the end of this exciting episode. Before you go, if you liked the video, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss anything. And don't forget to comment below. And as always, if you have any questions, you can find me here or on social media, links below. And I'll see you in the next exciting episode of Taiwan in English. Bye.